You ever hear one of those stories that starts so bad you're sure it can't end well? And then somehow it does, just not in the way you expect? This is one of those. She was kicked out of her father's house while she was pregnant. No shoes, no money, nowhere to go. He was the broke orphan she loved, who swore he'd make something of himself even if it meant risking his life across the desert and the sea. 8 years later, he came back, not as a beggar, but as a billionaire doctor. And when they saw each other again, yeah, that moment stopped the air. Amaka and Nonso weren't supposed to happen. She grew up under the watch of a retired soldier father, strict, stubborn, proud, and his #1 rule was stay away from poor boys. Nonso was the poorest of them all, losing both parents in middle school, living with an uncle who barely knew he was there. Still, after class, they'd walk home together, sit under the mango tree, and talk about the future, her dream to be a nurse, his to be a doctor. People laughed, called it a waste of time. But she believed him. Then she missed her period. At first, stress, she thought, until her belly started to show. Telling him she was pregnant was hard, but telling her father was impossible. And when he found out, it went exactly the way you'd imagine. Shouting, a slap, a bag tossed at her feet, and a door slammed in her face. She walked down the road with strangers staring, slept behind kiosks, and sold fruit in the heat just to eat. Meanwhile, Nonso made a choice that was half desperation, half madness. He'd join a group heading for Europe through the desert. It's risky, he told her. But if I make it, I'll come back for you and the baby. You know what I mean when I say the Sahara doesn't care about your dreams? Days without water, nights that froze. Friends buried in the sand. And then the sea, 15 people in a rubber boat, no life jackets. The storm hit at night, waves like walls, the boat flipping, the cold taking your breath. He blacked out and woke up lying on something alive, a whale, gliding silently toward the Spanish coast. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but it carried him to shallow water before slipping away. That was the day his new life started. He collapsed on the beach, got found by a retired teacher named Diego who took him in, helped him get medical training, pushed him through school. Nonso studied like a man on fire, but every night he searched for Amaka. No answer, no address, nothing. 5 years later, he graduated top of his class, Dr. Nonso, but the 2 people he wanted to celebrate with were still gone. Back home, Amaka was raising Chisholm, their boy, in an uncompleted building with no light. No toilet, just a mat on the floor. She hawked oranges from dawn to night, sometimes borrowing enough to buy fruit, sometimes going to sleep with nothing but water and salt. When Chisholm asked why they worked every day, she'd say, "So we can eat." And when he asked when they'd stop, she'd smile and whisper, "Soon." She kept a faded photo of Nonso in a plastic bag, telling her son, "Your father's a good man. He didn't leave us on purpose." 8 years after he left, Nonso stepped off a plane in Lagos, not in designer suits or fancy cars, but dressed like the boy he used to be. First stop, her father's house. The old man saw him, and his face twisted with the same hate from before. "I don't care where she is. I don't care what she's doing. I never want to see her or that bastard child," he spat. It hit like a punch, but Nonso just walked away and started asking around. Days later, in a dusty market, an old woman selling groundnuts mentioned a fruit hawker who stayed in a broken building. He ran there, heart in his throat. Inside, a boy sat peeling an orange. His face was like looking into a mirror. Then he heard her voice. She stepped out, thinner, older, barefoot, a bowl in her hands. The bowl dropped. "Nonso." He said her name back. She fell to her knees, crying. "I didn't die," he told her. "I came back for you, for our son." When she introduced Chisholm, "This is your father," the boy stared, then ran into his arms. That night, he took them to a hotel. They ate until they were full, slept on a soft bed, laughed in ways they hadn't in years. The next morning, he brought them to a white-painted mansion with a fountain in the yard. "All this is for us?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "You suffered enough. It's your time." A week later, he told her, "It's time." And she knew exactly what he meant. They dressed sharp, him in a white senator outfit, her in a blue gown. Chisholm in a fresh shirt and sneakers, and pulled up to her father's compound in a black Rolls-Royce. Villagers stopped to stare. The old man looked up, dropped his stick, and for the first time, he knelt. "My daughter, I'm sorry. I was a fool. She looked at the man who'd thrown her out, who'd called her child a mistake, and said, "I didn't come for revenge. I came to show you God lifted me from the ground you threw me into." He begged to see his grandson. She paused, turned toward the boy, then toward the house where her shame began, and said softly, "Not today. Maybe someday, but not today." She walked back to the car, Chisholm's hand in hers. Nonso gave the old man one last nod before the door shut. As the car rolled away, the villagers watched, whispering. Her father stood alone in the dust, tears on his face. Amaka leaned back, eyes closed. "Maybe one day I'll forgive him," she murmured. "But not today." And here's the thing. Was she right to walk away? Or should she have let him in? You tell me. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Because some wounds, even after 8 years, don't close the way you think they will. You know, when that car pulled away from her father's compound, you'd think that was the end of it. Rolling credits, happily ever after. But life doesn't really do neat endings, does it? That drive back to the mansion was quiet, the kind of quiet where everyone's thinking something different. Chisholm was staring out the window, probably trying to piece together why his mom had just walked away from the man calling himself her father. Amaka had that look, you know, the one where you're both relieved and still carrying a little weight in your chest. And Nonso was watching her in the reflection, like he was making sure she was really there this time. That night, they ate dinner together in the big dining room. 3 chairs where once there'd been none. Chisholm kept asking questions about Spain, about the hospital where his dad worked, about whether they'd ever go on an airplane. Amaka laughed at some of them, but every now and then you could see her drift off, like part of her mind was still back in that dusty yard. After Chisholm went to bed, Nonso poured her a glass of juice and asked the thing he'd been holding in all day. "If I asked you to marry me tomorrow, would you say yes?" She looked at him for a long second, then smiled. "Tomorrow? No, but ask me the day after." 2 mornings later, they did it. Nothing over the top, just a small ceremony in the garden. A few close friends Nonso had in Lagos, and Mr. Diego who'd flown in all the way from Spain. The man hugged Amaka like a father, told her, "He never stopped talking about you." She squeezed his hands and whispered, "Thank you for keeping him alive." Chisholm stood between them, holding the rings like it was the most important job in the world. When Nonso slid that band onto her finger, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. But here's the twist no one saw coming. Word of their wedding got around faster than they thought. By evening, Amaka's father was standing outside the mansion gate, his stick in one hand, a paper envelope in the other. The guards asked if they should turn him away. Amaka hesitated, then went out alone. He didn't try to come in, didn't shout, just held out the envelope. "These are letters," he said quietly. "From your mother. She wrote them before she died. I kept them because I was angry. I was wrong." She took the envelope, and for a second their eyes met. No forgiveness yet, but something less hard than before. She went back inside, shut the door, and opened the first letter. Her mother had written about missing her laugh, about how she'd argued with her father to take her back, about praying she'd be safe. Amaka read every word, and when she finished, she just sat there holding the pages, tears running down her cheeks in a way even Nonso didn't interrupt. Life after that didn't turn into a fairy tale overnight. There were still nights she woke up from dreams of sleeping on cold concrete, still days when Chisholm clung to her if she walked too far. But there was also breakfast together in the sunroom, school runs in a gleaming car, trips to the market where people now called her Madam instead of fruit seller. Nonso kept his promise, never missing a school play, never letting her feel like she was fighting alone. And yet, sometimes, when the air was still and the house was quiet, she'd stand by the window looking toward the road that led back to her old village. She'd wonder if her father sat outside in the same chair, if he regretted more than he let on. If there'd ever be a day when she'd drive down that road not to prove a point, but to actually sit and talk. One Sunday afternoon, Chisholm came running in from the yard holding a mango. "Mommy, this one's perfect," he grinned. She laughed, took it from him, and suddenly remembered that mango tree from years ago, the one where 2 broke kids had sat dreaming about this exact life without even knowing it. She called for Nonso, and when he came, she handed him a slice. "We made it," she said simply. He nodded, kissed her forehead, and whispered back, "Yeah, we did." Now, whether they ever walk back through that old gate is something no one can predict. but standing there in the sunlight, with her husband beside her and her son laughing in the garden. Amaka knew one thing. She'd finally stepped out of the shadow of that house for good. And sometimes, that's all the closure you need, or maybe it's just the beginning. So here's my question to you. If you were Amaka, would you ever open that gate again? Or is walking away the only way to win?